Okay, so I've got Tom Geiger on the line with UFCW21, a union in Seattle, Washington. Tom, I appreciate you being on the line with us today.
Great to be here.
Tell me a little bit about the union and what you do there. You're the communications director, right?
Yeah, so I am and have been for the last 10 plus years. UFCW21 is the largest private sector union in the state, of about 46,000 members across the state. We work in grocery stores, a lot of healthcare facilities, and many different kinds of retail establishments, as well as many other industries.
And so what are some of the benefits of unionizing?
Well, there are many. I mean, unionized workers across the country get generally higher wages. They get more protections in the workplace. They generally have health care at a greater percentage. They have different sorts of better retirement plans. So there's all sorts of kind of bread and butter benefits. And then also there's just more security in your job and knowing that you have a voice. And if there are issues, you can bring up concerns with your managers and others and not be unfairly disciplined. So there are a lot of different benefits. And in Washington State, I think we're now the third highest unionized state in the country, moving up from fourth place last year. So there are more and more people in Washington State becoming union members.
That's surprising because growing up, I associated unions with the automotive industry. And so Seattle is really heavy in tech. We obviously have manufacturers like Boeing here in Seattle. But for some of the millennials, the younger crowd who may not understand unionizing, how do you kind of see that picking up to go from more of a manufacturing to a company like Have a Heart, which is a cannabis rec shop? How is that being implemented in smaller businesses that aren't necessarily huge automotive manufacturers? And what are some of the other clients that you have that have decided to unionize?
Yeah, so we represent people across many different industries, but let's just look at retail and grocery stores for a little bit. In grocery stores, we represent about 65% of the grocery store overall market in the greater Puget Sound area. So it's a massive number of workers, but it really runs the gamut, right? We represent workers at Safeway and QFC, Fred Meyer, Albertsons, the big national chains. But then there's also very small kind of, Red Apple markets, PCC community markets, town and countries, smaller and even very small establishments that over the years where workers have expressed an interest in having a say and some control in the workplace, having a contract that allows them to enforce their workplace standards, and then every few years renegotiate those as equals with their employer. It's just so different than the general, hey, if you don't like this job, there's the door kind of an attitude in an at-will state, which is we are one of them. And then with Have a Heart, it just kind of came to us as well. Where Ryan, the CEO, unlike many CEOs, he actually approached us and said that he was interested in having, and the workers there were interested in having. So we brokered that greater conversation. We're able to reach an agreement working with the workers and the employer, and have one of the first unionized cannabis retail contracts in the state of Washington.
Yeah, having Have a Heart unionized made national headlines because you're seeing a lot of restaurants adding touch screens, and with the minimum wage in Seattle also making national and global headlines, there's been a reduction in the number of employees. So it's almost counterintuitive to what maybe a small business might think when they're looking at just the bottom line. And so I'm curious, with a lot of the automation in the future that we're going to see with touchscreens, the benefit for a lot of these millennials who are maybe looking for additional benefits, do you see them seeking out unionized specific companies that have that advantage for employees?
I think there's a lot of education that would be valuable to have out there. The role of unions, the kind of the narrative around that is certainly a mixed one, and I think intentionally mixed by those who might oppose workers having a union. I think that the unions of today need to become the unions of tomorrow, and we here at 21 are certainly engaged in that. We just had a big forum where we had 150 of our members, as well as workers that are non-unionized workers and community people, come together here in our union hall around what we call a future of work forum to discuss some of those very issues. What is the future of work? What sort of skills in the future? How does automation and technology impact what the jobs in the future are going to be, and what sort of roles can workers have in both controlling and having impact on that, and then also ensuring that they have the skills and training to be able to provide those jobs in the future that are going to be there. And the unionized workers have some leverage in that discussion they wouldn't have if you were just an individual worker out there in the marketplace. So I think not being just stuck in the old days, but thinking about the current reality in the future, and working with younger people, women, and people of color in particular, who are the workforce in the emerging electorate, that's an important reality for unions to make sure that we're checking in on and we're moving forward on.
That's great to hear. The cannabis industry definitely is not diverse. It typically is older white men. So to hear that there's some females and some minorities that are being kind of involved with at least the unionizing aspect is good. And then hopefully the cannabis and hemp industry will pick up that as an added benefit to its employees. And
I would add on that, Joshua, real quick, that some of the key worker leaders at Have a Heart, as I met them last fall, were definitely younger, and many of them women and people of color that kind of emerge as workplace leaders who otherwise may not. So that's definitely at least a potential in a unionized workplace that I think you might not have in some other areas.
Well, specifically with Ryan of Have a Heart, he's been an industry leader from the very beginning. So I think he's definitely probably seeking out that diversity, not only for his own staff, but just to be relevant within the communities that he serves as well. So he's definitely a leader. And he's also preventing a lot of loss, just to be candid. What I see in the industry is a lot of turnover, and to prevent that is to add a benefit. Unionizing adds a lot of benefits where, maybe your hourly wage is low, but if you have, like you mentioned, the healthcare and all of these other benefits, that's going to maybe stem that loss with the massive turnover that we've seen in the cannabis industry. Are there any statistics that you can provide or anything that you've seen that sort of stems the loss or flow in employee turnover? Because it's about $2,000 for each employee, the cost of having to retrain them. And with the massive turnover we've seen in the cannabis industry, these companies can't afford that.
Well, I'm not an expert on the cannabis industry. It's certainly an emerging industry, and that's something that we are, have our toe in the water on there. But I wouldn't want to come across an expert on that. We are interested in the growing industry as a whole, well beyond Have a Heart. So looking at other places where workers may be interested in having unions and trying to work out a future there. I would say that issue of turnover is pretty. It's a significant issue across the board in a lot of service industry type and retail industry types of jobs. Whether they're unionized or not, you can see a lot of that turnover. We as a union are trying our best to work with employers to reduce that. I think things like some of the stuff we're proposing now in some grocery store contracts that we're doing to engage the employer on what sort of training do you provide for new people. A lot of people are coming into these positions that are not considered, quote, skilled positions when in fact they are. And people kind of feel like they're drowning and they don't last too long, and there's turnover. And it just doesn't help for anyone. So implementing effective training programs, both the amount of training over time as well as the content of the training, I think help the workers, and then ultimately ultimately that helps the customer and the profit margin and the employer. So we think it's kind of a win-win to engage the workers in training, and they themselves know the types of training that is going to be effective if they've been around there for 3 or 4 years. Engage those more veteran workers, or maybe 2 or 3 decades. Let's engage them in what the best type of training that we should have.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like unionizing is at least one strategy to try and retain some of those employees with companies that are trying to at least close the door on that employee turnover. Are there any specific tools or technologies that you guys are implementing to try and establish or kind of create this technology either in break rooms or otherwise with not just onboarding but retention as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the unionized workplace in particular, I don't have that much experience elsewhere. One of the key things that we're doing is increasing what we call leadership development. So, a union is only as strong as its members, and the members themselves are going to tend to be more engaged when a coworker who's a leader is the one communicating with them and engaging them on a daily basis on the shop floor, at the check stand, or as another budtender, or whatever the industry is. And the lesson is just, quite frankly, a union representative trying to establish a relationship. The better, and the more it is members that are trained on being leaders themselves, worker-to-worker power. I think that is the real nut to crack there. And we just recently, in the last few years, have elevated that as a priority. And now we have a goal by the end of the year to have 2,500 trained workplace leaders in our union. And right now we're up to 1,900 as of May 15th here in the middle of May. So, we're well on our way to that. And I think that type of presence in a workplace, and then all of the data that goes along with that, right? So you have people's cell phone numbers, you can text people, you have people's, you develop an app, like we've just recently been developing an app that's really workplace worker friendly, so they can get questions 24/7 answered instead of waiting for a phone call to come back. Having that type of technology in place that's really useful and relevant to the current generation, as well as just old school, having a meeting in a coffee shop as well. All that type of stuff, I think, bodes for a better future for unions.
That's perfect. One question I had that I'll edit out is, have you heard of the Cannabis Alliance? It's a lobbyist group in Seattle.
I am not. Again, I'm not a person that is deeply knowledgeable on this. Again, it's kind of not radio broadcast, but I tend not to be that deep on the knowledge base on any one of our. We have 715 work locations around the state, about 200 contracts, 200 unique labor contracts. So I tend to be broadly aware of many of them, but not deeply knowledgeable on too many.
Okay.
But I'm kind of aware that there is this emerging, kind of sector out there for sure. One of the things that we're on the record, this will comment. One of the things that we did this session was work strongly down in Olympia with other partners to try to have some reforms that we think would be helpful in the law for cannabis. Again, it's emerging industry, but one of the challenges is that if you were a budtender and you did the same thing, which is unwittingly selling a controlled substance to a minor, it was a felony for marijuana, cannabis, but it was a grand misdemeanor if it was liquor, right, in a grocery store. We thought that there should be parity on that both things that shouldn't happen, and the law should control that. We were able to get that law passed. Having those sort of reforms, I think, are indications what you can do if you're coordinated labor and others pushing for change.
Brilliant. I love it. Anything anything else you want to add, Tom? How can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about unionizing and adding their shop to the union list?
Well, probably the easiest thing to do is to go to our website, UFCW21.org. It has a vast amount of information there about our union, our industries, our issues, but then it also has a staff directory and information about, hey, if you want a union at work, who can you contact? And there's good contact information right there.
Tom Geiger with UFCW21, union in Seattle that made world headlines with unionizing Have a Heart, a rec shop in Seattle. I appreciate you being on the podcast, Tom. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. I want to thank my guest, Tom Geiger, Communications Director for UFCW21. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.